Hello and welcome to On Air with Sandaire. Today we are at Carlton House Terrace, home to the British Academy for Humanities and Social Sciences. We are hosting top questions that families of wealth ask. We will be discussing children and money, planning, and leaving a legacy. On our panel of speakers, we have Tom McCullough, Chairman and CEO of Northwood Family Office, Peter Leach, partner of Deloitte UK, Juliette Johnson, founder of Juliette Johnson Consultancy, and Caroline Burkart, senior consultant with Scorpio Partnership.
Okay, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Fleming, and I'm the Chief Executive of Sandaire, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to the British Academy this evening for our More to Wealth event, and for what I'm sure will be a fascinating and insightful evening. Caroline, can you tell us some facts about children and wealth?
So what we discovered, obviously, it almost goes without saying, it obviously helps to be prepared for your wealth transfer, or it can certainly have negative impact, particularly on family relations, apart from anything else. So it's really about harnessing good intentions of the benefactor and turning those into actions so that it really does benefit your inheritors. But we found that when we conducted the research, 53% of ultra-high net worth inheritors were not prepared to receive a wealth transfer in really any shape or form, and that 43% of them reported that their benefactor hadn't even discussed what the reasons were behind the wealth transfer plan. So that's a fairly hefty proportion of individuals inheriting money who hadn't been prepared for it. And we also found, though, that 49% of inheritors have picked up their knowledge either through formal or informal conversations with their parents and with their families. So the overarching theme really is all about good communications as a starting point within a family.
Peter, what are your thoughts on some of those statistics we've heard?
Well, it's astonishing, isn't it? 50 and 40%. If you don't plan it, it's going to go wrong. And dropping a bundle of money on somebody who isn't prepared is not going to do them any good. It's certainly probably not going to do the money any good. But it is a terrible burden, and it shouldn't be. So I'm sure we're going to get into the detail of it, but those are pretty horrifying.
Julia?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's quite amazing to think that something that plays such a substantial role in people's lives is something that just isn't really talked about. And I see all the time how difficult it is for, particularly from the next generation's perspective, to ask those questions of their parents without sounding that they're entitled or that they've made assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. So if the parents aren't opening up those conversations, it becomes really difficult to create that dialogue between both generations, really, so that people can be properly prepared.
And to be fair, parents are probably afraid at one level to, if you disclose too early, that you're going to take away self-esteem, and those are fair questions too. And it's an awkward topic. So that certainly does not lead to easy and regular conversations.
Do you think some of these challenges with children and wealth today are greater than they've ever been, or perhaps were easier in earlier generations? Or what's your thoughts?
I think they're much harder today because the numbers are so big.
Yes, I agree.
And there's so much more wealth. I think in the States it's always been a bit easier than it has been in the UK. We've always, money was called filthy lucre. There was an upstairs, downstairs culture here, where money was never talked about. It was a bad thing, whereas in the States, money is good. The Americans have got a march on the UK on that. But if you go around the world, certainly in Asia and other places, they talk about the money much more openly. So a father will say to their offspring, well, I've got $5 billion, and you'll find out what happens to it the day I die, because the letter will be opened after I've gone. And they all know that's what's going to happen. That's the Chinese model. So, it's not that they don't talk about it, but they don't explain it. So that they know the money's there, but they don't do the detail. Whereas, in other countries, it's different.
Is there a perfect age for explaining this wealth in a family to the next generation?
It's so hard to generalise. I mean, for every family, you've got a mix of different individuals within the family and different levels of maturity and different life experiences. And I think parents often look at this subject in quite an overwhelming way. I mean, I would kind of challenge slightly what you just said. I think to some extent it's easier now than it's ever been to talk about it, because this stuff is so publicly available that in the past, you would never have asked your parents about how much money they've got. Now you can kind of Google or do all sorts of things. And even if you pretend you don't know, actually you do have a pretty good idea of what's going on. So I think it's really hard to keep it a secret, and if you don't know, the chances are your peers know and somebody else will say something to you. So the more transparent people can be, I think the better. But it doesn't make it any easier. So coming back to your question, is there a perfect age? No, I mean, but it's also not an event that happens. It's only an event that happens if it happens at the will reading. It really should be a process that happens very gradually over time.
What you were saying, and I agree with, is it's not so much an age, it's the readiness of the person, the child or offspring, to receive in some cases. But in the chapter by Peter Evans on what age, how much should you give your children and at what age, he has a view that children should not receive substantial inheritance until they're 35 or 40. And his argument is they should have to earn their way into adulthood and go through enough experiences to build self-esteem, have some life experience. Not everybody agrees with that, for sure. And another interesting piece in the book, it talks about, instead of giving money at, say, 25 years old, when you probably don't need it, or 75 when you don't need it, somewhere in between, and often it can be tied to life events and often tied to matching, so that the person is putting up some money themselves and maybe getting matched. Because often parents despite the wealth, want their kids to be normal in some way. And normal can be tricky when there's lots and lots of money in the family. So you have to, as somebody, I forget who it is in the book, says, try and give your kids experience in the bleachers as well as the box seats. So, some experience of what typical people go through, yeah.
Is there a role for professional advisors alongside the parents there in educating?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, if you asked me back when I started our business in 2003, how much of our time we would spend on what I'll call the psychology issues, helping people think through the challenges of family, I would never have guessed that it's probably 30 or 40% of what we do. And I would never have guessed that. I'm basically into similar roles to what you're doing in many cases. So yes, I think there's absolutely roles for that. And obviously in the roles that you folks play, it's important.
Yeah, there's definitely a role for professional advisors, but not in the absence of parents. And I think that's often what happens as well, that if I can give it to the advisors, then I don't have to take responsibility for it myself. And I'm building at the moment a programme for a very significant family, and the programme is being driven by their family office. So the two professionals who are running their family office. And I've pushed back really hard on that, because I've said, that's just not the way it can work. It has to be led by the parents. It's about their storytelling. It's about their experiences. The professional advisors have a role to play, but they can't drive it in the absence of the parents.
Yes.
And that's...
The parents don't want to deal with it.
Parents don't want to deal with it, and that's part of the challenge. And that, that isn't going to lead to a healthy dialogue between both generations. And ultimately, there's a gap missing. So I think it's as much the job of the professional advisor to sometimes push back on the family and say, actually, that's just not the right way to go about that.